here are the hints that will help you to answer these questions on MathSpace. I know you might have different numbers on MathSpace, but here will give you general guidelines here. I'm sure you can figure out just changing a different number is the same concept. The first question here, they ask you how does the graph of y equal to cosine x differ from the graph of y equal to cosine x? We see the number in front of cosine. One has 3, the other does not have 3. What does 3 represent here? 3 represent the number in front of a cosine, that is the amplitude. What are the amplitude? Amplitude are the number on the y-axis, right? So on the y-axis, you always draw a positive y-axis and negative y-axis, and your graph is always going in between those, right? So make sure we know that amplitude also gives us the maximum value. After those knowledge, what is your choice here? So make sure we're talking about amplitude. 3 times greater than the amplitude of y equal to cosine x. So that's your answer. And also the maximum value, right, is 3 times greater than the other one. So those two make sense. Second question, they want you to state the amplitude, which is a number in front of sine. Make sure you do absolute value of sine, so your amplitude is 3. Number 3. Which of the following transformations of y equal to cosine x has a different amplitude to y equal to cosine x? The only number that will make a change for the amplitude is, let's review the formula, a cosine bx plus c plus d. So the letter A represents the amplitude, which is a number in front of cosine. The only equation I see a number given in front of a cosine is C. So your answer here should be C. Number 4, part A, they want you to identify the amplitude of the function, which is the number in front of sine, 3/4. When you graph the function, after you know the amplitude, you have to find the period, which is 2 pi over b. B is a number in front of x. I don't see a number here, so it's 2 pi over 1. Period is 2 pi. Well, look at this graph here. They give us the numbers in degrees. Okay, which means we have to convert the 2 pi to degree. Let's review. You can multiply the formula, which is 180 over pi. Pi cancel out. 2 times 180 is 360. So 2 pi, which also equivalent to 360. We put the period on the x-axis, amplitude on the y-axis. Okay, now we do the same thing. Cut the period to 3 parts. First, what is the midpoint between 0 and 360? 0 plus 360 divided by 2, which is 180. And then 2 more midpoints. 0 plus 180 divided by 2, 90. Between 180 and 360, which is 180 plus 360 divided by 2, you will have 270. We don't see any horizontal and vertical shift for these functions, 3/4 sine x. So we can go ahead to graph the pattern, which is center or origin, maximum, center, minimum, and the center. I'm sure you guys can find those points on the graph here to plot this sine function. So 90 to 1, 180, 270, and 360. That should be your graph for this function. question number 5 is ask you to find the transformation represent a change in the period of the function. So here is the equation a cosine bx plus c plus d. Which letter here that will help you to find the period? Period is 2 pi over b. So all you need is the number that is b. Okay, so let's look at the options here. They will represent change in the period. Okay, so make sure they will give you the number in front of b. Okay, here I see 1, here I see 1. That's it, right? All other options here, I don't see a number in front of x. The b value did not change, stays as 1. So your only choice should be A and D. Number 6. Part A, they want us to figure out what transformations has happened. Okay, so let's look at this equation. Cosine function. Formula is A times cosine bx plus c plus d. Transformations which will have horizontal shift or vertical shift. The formula for horizontal shift is c over b. Let's look at the equation here. We do have c, which is negative pi over 3. What is the b value? The number in front of x, which is 2. How to simplify this equation? Keep change and flip. Keep the numerator, which is negative pi over 3. Change division to multiplication. It was divided by 2, now becomes multiplied by 1/2. So becomes a negative pi over 6, which means I'm moving pi over 6 to the right. When the number is less than 0, you are moving to the right. We don't have a d value here, so there is no vertical shift. Here we can tell we have a horizontal shift. The options here are horizontal dilation and horizontal translation. When b is not equal to 1, then we have both horizontal dilation and horizontal translation. However, if b is equal to 1, we have a c over b, which will become c divided by 1, then that will be c. If you only have a c value, then for those cases, you will only have horizontal translation. You will not have horizontal dilation. For this question, y equal to cosine 2x minus pi over 3, we do have a b value. So we do have both case here, which is horizontal dilation and horizontal translation. Part B is asking the graph of a cosine function has decreased by its period. Basically, they're asking you to find the period. Period formula is 2 pi over b, which is 2 pi over b value is a number in front of x, which is 2. 2 pi over 2, simplify out, cancel out 2. Your period is pi. Let's compare this back to the original function, which is cosine x. The period is 2 pi over b. b is 1 in this case, so period is 2 pi. Let's answer the question here. The graph of y equal to cosine x has a decrease from 2 pi to pi, which means it decreases period by a factor of from 2 pi to pi by a factor of 2. And has undergone a phase shift of the answer we find before. Pi over 6 to the right. Now we are going to answer the last question. Graph cosine 2x minus pi over 3. We already have the amplitude, which is 1, period which is pi, and the horizontal shift, which is pi over 6 to the right. We know that the vertical shift is none. With this information, we can graph the function. Amplitude, we label that on the y-axis, 1 and negative 1. Period, we label on the x-axis, pi. Now we're going to find the midpoints 3 times. Between 0 and pi, 0 plus pi divided by 2, pi over 2. Between 0 and pi over 2, 0 plus pi over 2 divided by 2. If you cannot do that in your head, please write it out. 0 plus pi over 2 divided by 2, which is pi over 2. Keep, change, and flip. Divided by 2 becomes multiplied by 1/2. So you have pi over 4. And the last midpoint, which is between pi over 2 and pi. So you can also do that by hand. Pi over 2 plus pi divided by 2. Pi over 2 plus pi. The least common denominator is 2. Pi becomes 2 pi over 2 divided by 2. Together, for the numerator, you have 3 pi over 2 divided by 2. Keep, change, and flip. 3 pi over 2 times 1/2. Your final answer is 3 pi over 4. So here you should have 3 pi over 4. I'm going to erase the extra stuff here so it will be easier for us to follow. However, when you are doing your summative, please show all your work. I would like to see all those steps on your paper too. Now we can start to graph the function. The pattern for cosine function is maximum point, center, minimum, center, and the maximum point. Do not forget about the horizontal shift. The easiest way to do the horizontal shift is to write out the points. So let's go ahead to do that. I have to make everything smaller for me to have a space to find the horizontal shift. Okay, for horizontal shift, I want to do a table showing the original points and my final after transformations points. My original points are 0, 1, pi over 4, 0, pi over 2, negative 1, 3 pi over 4, 0, pi, and a positive 1. Our translations is all the x value plus pi over 6 because we are moving pi over 6 to the right. And we don't have vertical translation, so none for the y coordinates. All the x numbers need to add pi over 6, so let's go ahead. 0 plus pi over 6, you have pi over 6 and 1. Pi over 4 plus pi over 6 and 0. Pi over 4 plus pi over 6, the least common denominator is 12. 4 times 3 is 12, so 3 pi over 12 plus 6 times 2 is 12, so 2 pi over 12 and 0. Total, you have 5 pi over 12 and 0. Pi over 2 plus pi over 6 and negative 1, you have this common denominator is 6. 3 pi over 6 plus pi over 6 and negative 1, which you have 4 pi over 6 and negative 1, which is 2 pi over 3 and negative 1. Next point, 3 pi over 4 plus pi over 6 and 0. The least common denominator is 12. 4 times 3 is 12, so 9 pi on the top plus 2 pi and the common 0, which you have 11 pi over 12 and 0. Last point, pi plus pi over 6 and 1. You have least common denominator is 6. 6 pi plus pi, 7 pi over 6 and 1. So those are your final points, which they are pi over 6, 5 pi over 12, 0, 2 pi over 3, negative 1, 11 pi over 12, 0, 7 pi over 6, and 1. We should be able to find these points on the graph. Let's see. Pi over 6 and 1 is right here. Next point is 5 pi over 12, comma 0. I'm sure when you're moving these points around, you should be able to see more numbers on the x-axis. Then you should be able to find 5 pi over 12.